Welcome. My name is Lisa Garcia Beloya. I serve as Vice Provost for Graduate Studies and Dean of the Graduate Division here at Berkeley, and it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you to our 2025 Grad Slam competition. Today's event comes on the heels of Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week, a week that seeks to emphasize the contributions, impact, and value of graduate and professional students on campuses throughout the United States. What could be more fitting than to round out that week with Grad Slam, an opportunity to celebrate and make visible the outstanding research that our graduate students do every day. Grad Slam was launched 11 years ago by former UC President Janet Napolitano, with the goal of sharpening graduate student communication skills and providing them with the opportunity to let the public learn more about the research being undertaken by graduate students at the 10 UC campuses. This program also enables us to demonstrate our commitment to access in that it asks graduate students to present their research in accessible, jargon-free language. Especially as a public university, it is our responsibility to communicate our research in a manner that is accessible to a general audience and not just academic specialists. Here's how the UC-wide Grad Slam competition works. Each of the 10 campuses conducts its own campus-wide competition and selects a finalist to compete in a system-wide event, which will be hosted this year by UC President Michael Drake on April 29th. That competition will be live streamed, and we hope you will all log in and join us again to cheer on the 10 UC finalists. Here's the process we use at Berkeley to determine who our campus finalists will be. A faculty subcommittee of the Graduate Council reviewed videos submitted by graduate students from a range of disciplines and selected the 10 semifinalists whose presentations you will hear today. Let me take this opportunity to thank the members of the Advisory Committee for Graduate Student and Postdoctoral Scholar Professional Development for all their hard work. We know there were many worthy submissions, and every year it's very difficult to choose our semifinalists. Today's presentations have been evaluated by a distinguished panel of judges. I would like to take a a postdoctoral fellow at the Institut Pasteur in Paris. Our heartfelt thanks to each of you for volunteering your time. In addition to the panel of judges, several years ago, we introduced a new feature to the competition. You, our audience members, will also be judges today. You will be invited after the presentations to select a People's Choice winner. I will tell you more about that later. Now, I am very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Victoria Chevet, a PhD. She has received her PhD in molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley, and as I mentioned before, is now a postdoctoral fellow at the Institut Pasteur in Paris. Victoria kindly recorded a message for us to share her reflections on the value of the Grad Slam program.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited to be here and to kick off the 2025 Berkeley Grad Slam competition. First and foremost, I want to take a moment to celebrate all of our semi-finalists. Congratulations! Grad Slam is an incredible journey. It starts with a simple decision, putting yourself out there and sharing your work. But as you all know, it doesn't stop there. It takes effort, dedication, and an openness to refining, reworking, and sometimes completely restructuring your talk to get it just right. So once again, congratulations on everything you've accomplished to be here today. Now, for those of you watching and considering applying to Grad Slam next year, you might be wondering why I take on this challenge. You already have your research, plus maybe some mentoring or other outreach activities, not to mention keeping your sanity together right now. Why add something else to your plate? For me, the reason to participate in Grad Slam comes down to 3 main points. The first one is your research is most impactful when people understand it. So being able to explain your work clearly in just 3 minutes means you can quickly connect with colleagues and potential collaborators and see if there's common ground without losing people in the details. Once you leave grad school, no matter which career path you take, your ability to communicate complex ideas clearly will help you grow. Whether you're pitching an idea, interviewing for a job, or leading a team, effective communication will always be one of your major assets. When I applied for Grad Slam, I thought I was a pretty decent public speaker, but after countless rounds of feedback and revisions, I realized that what seemed clear to me and to all my expert colleagues wasn't always clear to broader audiences. Thankfully, the Grad Slam team is incredibly invested in helping you succeed. It's a rare opportunity to get detailed, personalized feedback in such a supportive environment. So yes, Grad Slam helps you tell people what you do more concisely, but in addition, it helps you convey why it matters. And so that's my second point. You have to get people to care. A big part of being a researcher is making your work accessible to the public, whether it means explaining it to your family, to kids at school, to your broader community, or even while you're trying to secure funding or engage with investors or policymakers. You can be doing what you think is the coolest research. People will always ask, why does this matter? Some of us might feel like to gain knowledge is a perfectly good answer, but unfortunately, not everyone is satisfied with that particular answer. I personally experienced this again recently. I was applying for funding for my postdoc and had to defend my proposal. I am studying neuroimmunology now, which I find to be really exciting field. Yet the judges still asked me, how is this relevant to the general public? To convince them of the value of my ideas, I found myself revisiting my Grad Slam slides, drawing from the skills I had developed to present my work in a way that would resonate with experts outside of my field. It was a clear reminder that the skills you hone here can have a real and practical applications beyond this competition. So finally, my third reason for why you should participate in Grad Slam is that a little friendly competition can be quite fun. I know not everyone loves competition and that academia already gives us plenty of chances to compare ourselves to each other. But Grad Slam is different. It's a low stakes, high reward opportunity. You get to challenge yourself and hone skills that are good for your career, but you're doing it in an incredibly supportive environment. All of the members of the Grad Slam team want you to succeed. And win or lose, you walk away with better communication skills, new confidence, and possibly a little extra money if you do win. It's pretty great. So to our semi-finalists here, thank you for your dedication and your willingness to step out of your comfort zone. And to those watching, maybe next year will be you up there. I hope you all enjoy the talks and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Victoria. In a minute, we will begin the presentations. First, a word about the order of the speakers. Rather than the usual last name alphabetical order, in an effort toward greater fairness to those at the end of the alphabet, we have randomized the selection. For the Grad Slam competition, each contestant has 3 minutes to present their research. According to the guidelines used in all Grad Slam competitions across the system, presentations are judged on intellectual significance, appropriateness, clarity, organization, engagement, delivery, and visuals. Points are deducted for every 3 seconds that the presenters exceed the 3-minute time maximum. In preparation for today's event, Berkeley AV helpfully pre-recorded the contestants' presentation. Our contestants are also here with us live in studio. So after each presentation, I will be asking each student 1 or 2 informal questions so we can get to know them and hear about how they came to their research area and what their future plans might be. After all 10 presentations, you will be invited to select our People's Choice Award recipient through an online link that we will provide. At that time, we will also invite the audience to submit questions for our panelists. After our contestants have answered the audience question, I will announce the winners. All 10 competitors today will receive at least $300, with the People's Choice second and first place finalists receiving $750, $1,000, and $3,000 respectively. Today's first place winner will go on to represent Berkeley at the UC-wide competition in Sacramento on April 29th. So let's get started. Our first presentation is from Wang Zhao, a third-year PhD student in materials science and engineering. Let's play the video.
Imagine a world where firefighters can see through thick smoke to locate deadly hotspots, where pilots are protected from invisible laser attacks, and where your groceries are quickly scanned for signs of spoilage. Sounds like science fiction, right? But all of this is possible today thanks to infrared light detection. But here's the catch, though. The materials we currently use have some serious limitations. Silicon, for example, is cheap, but it can detect a wide range of wavelengths. Mercury cadmium telluride works well, but it contains highly toxic and rare elements. And while germanium and indium gallium arsenide are highly effective for infrared detection, their high costs make them impractical for widespread or large-scale use. So how do we find a better solution? That's where my work comes in. Using supercomputers, I analyze a massive database of known materials, searching for a new candidate that's not only effective, but also safe and affordable. Let me walk you through how we're tackling this challenge step by step. It all starts with a pool of 150,000 known materials. To narrow this down, I use data like a material's band gap. That's the energy difference between its valence band and its conduction band. You can think of this like a hurdle that electrons need to jump over in order to conduct electricity. For infrared detection, we need materials with a band gap of less than 0.8 electron volts to absorb the wavelengths of infrared light. Using this criterion, I can quickly filter down this list to just 3,000 candidates in a few seconds. Next, I run rigorous calculations on these 3,000 materials to predict their infrared absorbing properties. This process takes hours on a supercomputer, but it sure is worth it. It helps me identify the most promising candidates with high confidence in their infrared absorbing properties. Once I have a short list, I dive deeper into their chemical composition. Are they toxic? Are they affordable? To answer these questions, I pull pricing data from the United States Geological Survey and toxicity data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to assess the cost and safety of each material. After all this analysis, one material stands out: zinc tin arsenide. With a band gap of 0.7 electron volts, it's perfect for infrared light detection, and even better, it's made from zinc and tin, two elements that are far cheaper than the indium and gallium used in current technologies. And it does contain arsenic. It's made from the much safer arsenic metal rather than the highly toxic fumes of arsine gas. By discovering materials like zinc tin arsenide, we're revolutionizing infrared detection, making it safer, more affordable, and more accessible. From protecting pilots to saving lives in emergencies, the future is looking quite bright. Thank you.
Wayne, for that wonderful presentation. So now I'd just like to ask you a few questions so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. Obviously you spoke to the practical needs for this kind of technology, but I'm wondering how you particularly became interested in this area of research.
Yeah, this was definitely like a quite cool, interesting area with detecting infrared light. So I first got interested by exploring solar materials, calculating band gaps for solar applications. But when I wanted to look deeper into it, I realized that there were materials that had small band gaps that were really hard to calculate, whether it's like a metal or it can detect the infrared light. And so this became like a personal challenge for me to just want to be able to figure out how we can find new infrared detecting materials for more sustainable infrared detection.
Thank you. And I really appreciated the energy you brought to your presentation. So it seems like you're enjoying your work, but I'm curious what part of it is the most fun for you?
I think at the end of the day, hopefully the applications will be very useful. I'm actually at a conference right now, and I'm able to share my research. And I got to talk to a lot of experimentalists who are quite interested in making the material for infrared applications.
That's great. Well, I hope you enjoy your conference, and thank you very much for being part of this year's competition.
Thank you.
So our second presentation is from Sekou Jabateh, a first-year PhD student in actually my field of political science. Let's play the video.
Imagine living in a society marked by decades of ethnic violence, where deep mistrust threatens any hope for lasting peace. In post-war Liberia, ethnic divisions remain a major barrier to reconciliation. Years of conflict reinforce out-group prejudice, making cooperation difficult. How can we break this cycle and rebuild trust? My research addresses this question. Through my NGO in Liberia, I conducted a year-long randomized experiment to test whether monetary transfers across ethnic lines could reduce prejudice and discrimination. Participants were randomly assigned to receive funds from either a donor of their wartime enemy ethnicity treatment or their own ethnicity control. The study focused on three key outcomes: ethnic prejudice, ethnic discrimination, and expected reciprocity, using baseline and follow-up surveys. The results were striking. First, ethnic prejudice dropped significantly. Those in the treatment group described members of the outgroup using more positive adjectives than those in the control group. Second, ethnic discrimination declined. In the dictator game used to test fairness and generosity, participants in the treatment group gave more to outgroup than those in the control group, even when it meant sacrificing their own real money. And finally, trust between ethnic groups grew stronger. In a reverse dictator game, treatment group members expected greater fairness from those outside of their own ethnic group. This suggests the intervention didn't just change behavior, it changed beliefs about intergroup cooperation. A year later, these effects remain strong. My observed effect sizes were 400% larger than the average in the prejudice reduction literature and 900% larger for interventions targeting ethnic lines. Why does this matter? For decades, community-driven development programs have been the dominant strategy for rebuilding social cohesion in post-war societies. The World Bank alone invests over $2 billion annually in these programs, which rely on intergroup contact to reduce prejudice and foster cooperation. But is contact enough? Research suggests its effects fade, especially when interactions are brief or externally imposed. My research offers a new approach. Instead of large-scale foreign aid, it shows that direct economic exchange between local groups without intermediaries can create lasting reduction in prejudice and discrimination.
It's now my pleasure to speak with Sekou. Thank you so much for giving us another way to think about how to overcome conflict within societies. You mentioned that you run an NGO, so I'm guessing that this was related to your work with them, but I'm curious, how did you became interested in this particular question of post-conflict relationships?
So I grew up in Liberia, where the legacy of civil war still affects daily life, especially relationships across ethnic lines. I saw firsthand how unresolved tensions linger long after violence ends, and that experience stayed with me. studying political science at the undergraduate level and now at graduate level gave me the tools to turn that personal observation into a research caution, asking really what actually rebuilds trust in post-conflict societies. So this research is my way of combining rigorous evidence with a deep personal investment in peace building.
So I find myself curious about what you're going to do with these findings if you haven't already, or what do you imagine would be the next steps of perhaps encouraging organizations like the World Bank and others to consider this strategy?
I think that, as I mentioned in the last 2 minutes of my presentation, is really engaging concerned ethnic groups rather than focusing on external programs that are especially brief.
Well, very good luck in your work, and thank you for being part of our competition. Our third presentation is from Zhe Fu, a fifth-year PhD candidate in civil and environmental engineering. Let's play the video.
Have you ever been stuck in traffic, barely moving, then suddenly speeding up, only to hit the brakes again? It's annoying, right? But here's something surprising. A lot of these traffic jams aren't caused by accidents or road closures. They just happen because of the way we drive. These stop-and-go patterns comes from how human reacts when driving. We see a gap, we speed up. If the car in front slows down, we brake. This back and forth creates waves of congestion, wasting fuel, making trips longer, and pumping more emissions into the air. Through my research, I have developed a solution to this problem. By controlling just a few automated vehicles with a carefully designed speed profile, we can smooth out the traffic for everyone. Those smart cars act like traffic managers, guiding humans around without them even noticing it. Here's how I do it. I collected real-time data from both road infrastructure and some cars on the road. The data is then processed in the cloud, where I applied my algorithm, which combines the statistical method and AI to generate what I call the magic speed profile. This magic speed profile is then broadcast to the controlled cars, guiding human drivers go with the flow. It's kind of like an orchestra conductor. With just a few signals, they can keep the whole group moving in harmony. And it works not just in simulations, but in real world. We conducted a massive traffic experiment with 100 automated vehicles driving on a busy section of I-24 highway during morning rush hours, surrounded by everyday drivers. The results? Smoother traffic, lower emissions, and less fuel wasted, saving energy and money for everyone on the road. And here comes the best part. You don't need a fancy self-driving car to make it happen. Imagine you have an app that tells you what's the best speed to follow, so anyone on the road can make traffic flow better. Traffic jams don't have to be part of life. A few smart cars can change the way everyone moves. So next time when you're stuck in traffic, imagine a future that those cars aren't part of the problem. They're part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhe, for that wonderful presentation. I'd like to put in a plug for you to have your next experiment be on I-80 in Vacaville, like on Sunday afternoon. That would be lovely. But I do have a few questions for you. The first is just beyond maybe having been stuck in traffic, what what made you most interested in this particular area of research?
Thank you so much, Lisa, for giving me the opportunity to share my story. I've always been curious and passionate about how emerging technologies can directly improve people's lives. And traffic systems stood out as an area that affecting everybody's daily life. And I was born and grew up in a really busy city, and I frequently experienced traffic jams myself and often felt motion sick from stop and go waves. Even back then, I kept thinking like, could there be a better way to like solve this problem? And later during my higher education, I discovered two exciting things. First, yes, emerging technologies absolutely can address these problems, like what I have just presented, using a few smart cars to alleviate stop and go waves. And second, these solutions can do even more, creating like broader benefits for society and achieving win-win outcomes, like the smart cars not only just like create more stable driving experience for themselves, but also like they impact the vehicles around them and benefit everyone on the road. So that kind of realization sparkled my journey into this really meaningful area of research.
Thank you. And I think probably every audience member can relate to that feeling of frustration that comes from being stuck in traffic with no reason. What aspect of your work do you enjoy the most?
That's a great question, Lisa. Thank you for asking. I think my biggest motivation is using emerging technologies to help solve real-world societal problems, especially those with clear and practical impacts. And what I've found especially rewarding and fun is seeing my algorithms come to life during like real-world experiments. Like I mentioned, the 100 automated vehicles experiment on the I-24 highway. And I'm super fortunate that I got a chance to witness how these solutions we developed actually improve people's everyday experience. And besides that, achieving this requires extensive collaboration. And I'm incredibly grateful to have worked closely with really talented researchers across different universities and even internationally. And I also very fortunate to have like partners in both the public and private sectors, including Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, and industry partners like Toyota, Nissan, and GM, etc. And these collaborations have made my PhD experience both unique and really meaningful.
Thank you so much for your work. Let's hope that it is distributed across lots of highways in the near future, and best of luck with your studies.
Thank you, Lisa.
Our fourth presentation is from Sydney Tomlinson, who is a fourth-year doctoral student in nutritional sciences and toxicology. Let's play the video.
Imagine walking through a forest. Trees tower above and leaves brush your legs. This is what it's like inside a cell. The plants represent proteins. And just like forests, cells can become diseased. For instance, non-native species like blackberry bushes can wreak havoc in a forest. Just as non-native diseased proteins can disrupt cellular function. So how can we treat this? Well, we can completely remove these diseased proteins from the cell using small molecules. Now, some proteins are easier to remove, like accessible blackberry bushes, while others are harder because they're buried deep within the cell, just like massive oak trees are buried deep within the ground. I'm specifically researching what types of proteins we can remove. This will create a blueprint that will allow us to design new small molecules to treat a wide range of diseases, from obesity and high cholesterol to even cancer. But first, we have to know how these small molecules work. So let's step back into the forest, and I want you to imagine that you're a forester and find an invasive blackberry bush. To remove it, you first identify it, then recruit the bush removal company, and they come and remove it. This is how these small molecules work. They first identify the disease protein and then recruit simple removal machinery to remove it. In the field, it's currently known that this simple machinery can remove these accessible proteins. But what about extracting an inaccessible and buried protein like a massive oak tree with a fungal infection? Scientists assume that the simple machinery is incapable of removing these. And as a result, these proteins are left untouched by science. I set out to prove that the simple removal machinery is able to clear all of these embedded proteins. To do this, I created cellular systems of these oak tree-like proteins with varying levels of complexity. Some simple, others with multiple trunks and deep roots that make them even harder to remove. Each protein is fused to the same pink label that a single small molecule recognizes. This molecule then recruits the simple removal machinery, thereby testing its abilities to remove a wide variety of embedded proteins. Quite remarkably, I found that the simple removal machinery could in fact remove all of these challenging proteins, even those with extensive roots. And this is really exciting because it allows us to reach proteins science has yet to touch and treat diseases once thought untreatable.
It is now my pleasure to speak with Sydney. Thank you so much. I have to say, I really appreciated your visuals of your bush removal company. You talked a little bit about why your work is important, but I'm curious what the journey was that brought you into this particular area of research.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it goes all the way kind of back to high school. And back to my original biology class where I got to isolate my own DNA from my cells. And I thought that was just really fascinating. And I even took it home, made a little necklace out of it, stored it in the freezer. Sorry, Mom, I think it's still there. But I think for me, that was the beginning of my interest in biology. And then that really kind of grew into sort of being able to understand these complex pathways in cells and how we can manipulate them to treat diseases.
You're making me feel that I wish my daughter's AP Bio class had fun labs like that to do for the rest of them, especially at 7:20 in the morning. So I'm curious, which aspect of your work these days do you find either the most fun or the most rewarding?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really goes back to the people. Like, we have a great environment here at Berkeley and in the lab. So just on a daily basis, talking with other PhD students, postdocs, undergraduates, really for me, that teamwork environment is what makes my day the most fun.
Thank you for bringing out and reminding us that science is a team sport. I think we tend to think about it as sort of individuals doing something, but it's such a collaborative enterprise, and that's the best part, I think, for many. And thank you so much for being part of our competition, Sydney. So our fifth presentation is from Hoyun Kim, who is a fifth-year doctoral candidate in education. Let's play the video.
We often ask, what are the impacts of that policy? As if policy implements itself. But technically, bills are just words on paper. So if we want to ask what difference a bill makes, what we should really look at is people's interpretations of those bills, which is often a mysterious box. Today, I want to open up that mysterious box, using the example of dual enrollment math in California. But first, some context. Dual enrollment is being dually enrolled in community college and high school at the same time. If you're a really motivated student, maybe you go to community college after school. But what if you don't have transportation or don't have the money? And so while dual enrollment is a great opportunity to be exposed to college while you're in high school, that opportunity isn't equal. That's why in California, Assembly Bill 288 was passed, which was meant to expand dual enrollment specifically for underserved students under the traditional system. The Public Policy Institute of California was funded by the Gates and California Community Foundations to research what was going on to dual enrollment math since. One of the findings is that underserved students are more equitably represented in dual enrollment math courses that are offered through CCAP as opposed to something else. But why would that be the case? After all, the bill doesn't give step-by-step instructions on what to do. That's why I conducted interviews with key stakeholders and actors at 5 different regions in California to understand what was going on. What I found is that people were using CCAP really creatively in a lot of different ways. But today, I'm going to talk about 3 main factors that came up. The first one is time and location. CCAP lets community colleges offer courses that are exclusive to high schools if the high schools offer those courses at the high school during the bell schedule. But this is actually really hard to do because high schools and community colleges, they work on different academic schedules. So instead of this meaning that CCAP couldn't be offered at all, districts were really creative by finding other ways, like looking for more nearby locations or offering the courses at 0 periods. Second is instructor. Because these courses were more accessible to the high schools, that meant that high school teachers who met the minimum qualifications to be hired by the community colleges could actually be the ones teaching that class. They would be hired as adjunct faculty, and that meant that the students would get more personalized instruction. And third, credit. Some districts offered high school credit as well as college credit for this course, and that meant that students didn't need to take additional courses to graduate high school. So all of these factors came into play to determine whether dual enrollment could be more accessible to a broader range of students or just students who had the resources to do something extra. And in sum, CCAP did help expand opportunities to dual enrollment math, but none of this would have been possible if it weren't for the creativity and the knowledge of the people on the ground to make it happen. That's policy in action.
Thank you so much, Hoyun, for digging into an important policy question and helping us see what makes it work, because I think often that's missed in policy analysis and really helps us understand how to make better policy in the future. So I'm going to ask you the same question, just a curiosity about how this particular area of research came to be of interest to you.
Yeah, of course. I think I would have to go back to my own experiences with education and how that informed my interest in education as a whole. So I moved around a lot as a kid, and part of what that meant is that I actually adjusted to different educational systems across countries. So I spent some of elementary school in the US, moved to Korea, went to school there all the way up till high school. And then in the middle of high school, I came back to the US, but I also lived in a different state. So even that was different. And I think during those times of transition, as a student, as a child, because school plays such a big part of your life when you're younger, I noticed there was a lot of cultural differences regarding schooling, particularly college, and what the purpose of college is and why it's important. And so that really piqued my interest, even when I finally went to college myself. Like, why was it so important? And how do people get into college, since the way you get into college is actually very different depending on the system you're part of, across countries, but also even within the United States, they have a lot of different options. You choose the courses that you take and such. And so that was my entry point into being interested in higher education in general, particularly policies and how that affects the trajectories of students. And then for this dual enrollment project, I actually learned that the Public Policy Institute of California was looking for somebody to conduct the qualitative research and take the lead on it too. And so I had the opportunity to really put all of my own personal questions into practice. And it was really nice to be able to not only learn more about the context in California in particular, but also engage with the people who are working with those policies.
Thank you. It sounds like an amazing opportunity. Which part of the work, personally, you talked about what brought you to care about this issue, but what do you find most rewarding about this research?
I think rewarding. If it comes to rewarding, then I think it's probably the fact that I got to talk with everybody through interview as a method, because this allowed me to talk with not only the instructors of these courses, but also the administrators who did all the work and paperwork, the background work to get these put on the table to begin with, and even the general stakeholders in the local areas that first learned about dual enrollment and other options they might be able to offer to their students. And after I was talking with all these people, as the person conducting the interviews, I could also tell them what I had been finding. And they were also very happy to hear and learn what they might be able to learn from other agents as well. So it was really rewarding to see how the work I was doing was not only tangible as like a presentation like today, but also in real time with the people who are technically the people that I'm studying.
Thank you so much, Hoyun, for sharing your research and being part of our competition today. Our sixth presentation is from Jaquesta Adams, who is a fifth-year doctoral candidate in chemistry. Let's play the video.
When we think, speak, and move, these actions are orchestrated by billions of neurons, nerve cells in our brains that talk to each other by transmitting chemicals like oxytocin. Oxytocin transmission is central to social and emotional behavior. So when something goes wrong, or less oxytocin is communicated from one neuron to the next, this can lead to social impairment disorders like anxiety and depression. That's the simple story. But the specifics of when, where, how much oxytocin is transmitted are poorly understood. The challenge is no tool can listen in on the oxytocin chatter between a single pair of neurons. So that's where I come in. I make sensors to interpret this oxytocin chatter using two things: single-walled carbon nanotubes, or SWENTs, and aptamers. SWENTs are 1 nanometer in width, meaning they're 100 times thinner than a single strand of hair, and at this tiny size, not only are they on the same size scale as neurons, they also have this property of fluorescence, meaning they give off unique light that we can detect. And aptamers are these molecules that can bind to specific targets like oxytocin based on their specific sequence. Think about it like this. SWENT is a light bulb and the aptamer is a cloth. When I'm making sensors, I'm figuratively wrapping the SWENT with the aptamer or covering the light bulb with a cloth, thus dimming its light. I then want oxytocin, and only oxytocin, to be able to come in and bind to that aptamer, thus changing its conformation on the SWENT and restoring the light. My research thus far has been a search for the aptamer that would allow oxytocin to fully rip the cloth off. I accomplished this starting from a library of over 10 billion aptamers and slowly but surely enriching and identifying those aptamers that interact the most with oxytocin. I then make sensors from these aptamers and SWENT and test them for qualities like their structural stability over time, as well as how much they turn on in response to oxytocin relative to other neurochemicals. Ultimately, one construct, which we now call Nanox, won best all around. Collaborators now use Nanox to probe the prairie vole, a rodent model with a type of social behavior similar to human friendship. They seek to understand how genetics and social environment, nature and nurture, affect the vole's release of oxytocin. This work ultimately brings us one step closer to understanding neurochemistry and therefore its role in anxiety, depression, and other social impairment disorders.
Thank you, Jaquesta, for that wonderful presentation and for this innovative work that should help so many in our society to deal with these disorders and issues. I'm curious what it is that made you interested in focusing on this area of research.
Yes, thank you. So I would say personally, and I think this is something that quite a few people can unfortunately relate to is kind of growing up and seeing members of your family or close friends experience neurological conditions, and kind of discovering that for many of these neurological conditions, they can be very poorly understood what's actually going on to reduce the symptoms that are observed, and there aren't really any like cures for these kinds of ailments. And so I decided pretty early on around high school that I wanted to kind of be able to contribute to developing the technology that would enable a better understanding of these sorts of conditions. I went into undergrad with this mindset, and I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to participate in research starting after my freshman year. And I got to work in a series of labs where I could actually work on developing, synthesizing, characterizing different types of nanomaterials. And that's where I was first kind of exposed to the potential of nanoscale materials to have this large scale impact in a variety of sectors and applications, particularly in neuroscience.
Thank you. And which aspect of the work do you find the most fun?
Yeah, honestly, for me, one of the most fun aspects of this work is the opportunity to work so closely within my lab, within the collaborators, the undergraduate students that I worked on this project with. I think everyone kind of comes in with their own expertise, and this kind of work, I am a chemist and I am developing these tools, but I am kind of aided if I can work very closely with neuroscientists and the individuals who actually have the expertise to implement these tools to actually interrogating neurobiological questions. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to engage in that sort of collaboration.
Thank you so much, Jaquesta, and good luck with hopefully your research will help many in the future. Our seventh presentation is from Jonathan Wang, a first-year master's student in electrical engineering and computer science. Let's play the video.
These past few years, we've seen an AI explosion. In fact, nowadays, it seems everyone's talking about AI, and it's not hard to see why. With generative AI tools ranging from ChatGPT to AI-powered drones and robots, it seems like AI is taking over every aspect of our daily lives. And that's why my research is heavily invested in AI's future. But I work on a different angle of things. I work on the hardware that powers AI. That's right. We're talking about those tiny but powerful computer chips that do all that complex AI processing. And I'm working to reduce the environmental impact of these AI chips. To start, an average AI chip is going to consume around 100 to 350 watts of power. And this isn't too much, and you can think of it as roughly the same amount of power as a small blender. But what happens when we have millions of these AI chips? Well, then your power bill is going to shoot up to greater than 100 megawatts. And that's what we call a data center. Data centers consume enormous amounts of power. According to the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, data centers consume about 4.4% of the United States total electricity consumption in 2023. And their demand is only going to grow. In fact, they project that the total electricity consumption by 2028 will be 12% data centers. And that's why my research is focused on doing whatever we can do to reduce the power consumption of AI chips. If we can make AI chips more energy efficient, then we can reduce the environmental impact of AI software. And that's why throughout my master's degree program, I've looked through a lot of different industry tools for modeling energy efficiency. But the problem with them is they're both very slow and very difficult to use. For a single energy efficiency rating of one software program, it can take upwards of 6 hours. And most importantly, these tools are only really accessible to hardware engineers. And the problem is, data centers, you have many different AI software programs running simultaneously, and they're constantly being updated by software developers. how can we model the energy efficiency of data centers in a useful way? Well, my research and work here at Berkeley is designed to answer this specific question. I've developed an energy model that can basically read the software code being run on AI chips and instantaneously provide an energy efficiency rating. That's right. We're talking about real-time energy modeling of data centers. And this energy model is trained on a machine learning algorithm that learns how the overall program structure of these AI software programs affects the energy efficiency. This way, software developers can overall lower the power consumption in these AI chips with their software. And if we can reduce the power consumption of data centers, we can reduce the environmental impact of AI. Thus, by making more energy efficient chips, we can continue to power the AI revolution.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that wonderful presentation and for lifting up how much energy every time one of our students uses ChatGPT, how much energy they're actually consuming. So I understand the practical importance of this issue, absolutely, but I'm curious what made you interested in it?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because when I was actually really young, I helped my dad build computers. And one of the questions I always asked, was when we're trying to run the computer, why does the computer start getting really, really hot? And I think that question just really never left me. And as I started going into high school and college and started really understanding how a computer worked, again, that question never left me. So I decided to kind of go into the research to sort of see why are these computers getting hot and what can we do to make them less hot? And when I learned about data centers, I learned, wow, they got to use water cooling and all this crazy technology just to get it to run with the amount of power they're consuming. I just thought, is there a way that we can help reduce that power consumption and I'll be able to also help the environment at the same time? And also, as this kind of a side note, what I realize is a lot of engineers and just a lot of people that work in data centers, their leadership always tells them about high energy, high power consumption, but I just thought, can we make it more real for them? Can we just give them real easy to understand live insights that can make their jobs easier so that they can appreciate and understand the importance of reducing energy consumption?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm wondering, same question is for others, what you might find most fun about the work?
I think kind of the cell is the most fun part. Being able to talk to other students and other engineers in industry, I think that experience is just great. Being able to sell them on how it's easy to be able to do energy analysis and also why it's important and just being able to see how easy it is for them. I just love being able to just show them that with my work, we can help reduce energy consumption in many different areas involving AI accelerators. And that's probably the most fun part, seeing them glow up and say, hey, I can use this.
And maybe we'll have another way to get students to not use ChatGPT to write that paper if they know how.
Yeah. If they see those numbers, they're going to say, I can just ask my classmates and go to office hours and we can do things normally with people. We don't need to use AI for everything.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much. And thank you for being part of our competition.
Thank you.
So our 8th presentation is from Cecil Egbele, who is a second-year master's student in our journalism program. Let's play the video.
America prides itself with honoring its veterans with medals, salutes, honors, and the promise that no soldier is left behind. But for some, this promise is a lie. At the heart of my film, Blacklisted, lies the exposure of betrayal of immigrant veterans by the U.S. through deportation. It looks at their struggles and questions the moral and legal framework that allows such deportation in the very first place. I'll tell you this through the story of Ruben Robles. Non-citizens like 78-year-old Ruben Robles joined the U.S. military with a green card and the promise of naturalization. He served during the Vietnam era and returned from the war with scars in the form of PTSD. He wasn't rehabilitated and took to drugs and alcohol for self-medication. He was honorably discharged, but not with the promise of citizenship. As a civilian, he battled homelessness and PTSD, fell out with the law, served his time in prison, and was deported after his time in prison instead of returning home to his family. He was deported to Mexico, a country he barely knew, and to a language he hardly understood, with only a shirt on his back. In Mexico, he suffered threats from gangs and cartel trying to recruit him because of his military background. Advocacy lawyers and other groups have been trying to make a case against the deportation of veterans and to stop further deportation of veterans. Their prayers was answered in 2021 through an executive order. Through this order, Roban was able to return to the US in December 2024. While you may say Roban is lucky, the one-year parole through which he came was halted 2 months after he entered. That also means that for many veterans around the world, trying to return to the US through this means have just seen their dreams crash before their very eyes. But you know what? When in exile, they can actually return, but in a casket. When they die, they are allowed into the country, given a military burial, thanked and saluted for service to God and country. How ironic, isn't it? Through personal stories like Ruben Robles, Blacklisted highlights the broken promises of citizenship to non-citizen veterans and the impact of deportation on those who laced up their boots to defend the country. It illustrates the fact that when these veterans needed America, America told them they were not Americans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecil, for raising this really important issue that I think most Americans just aren't aware of, and promises I think that the military has been making to non-citizen recruits for many, many decades, but not following through on. So I have the same curiosity question. What got you interested in this particular topic?
Thank you very much, and I'm glad I made it thus far. I'm from Nigeria. My dad served in the Nigerian army. He took part in the Biafran War until he passed on when I just came into Berkeley in the fall of 2023. He has been fighting to receive his benefit. And I thought it was really unfair that the Nigerian government would treat him this way. So when I met Professor in Law, Rose Goldberg, she presented to me this research she and her team did titled Broken Promises. When I looked through it, it told the story of different veterans and how the US has broken the promises of giving them their benefits. So when I looked at it, I felt like since I couldn't make a case, I couldn't help my dad, I should be able to tell the story of these people and try to bring to the fore and expose these ills that have been done to them. So that's part of what actually led me to want to do this story. I just want to bring out the issue, advocate it, and let's start a conversation around it and let people talk about it. And let's see if policymakers can take a decision on it.
So to that end, are there any other stories that you want to share or anything you want to say about where people can see the film or what people can do about this issue?
Yes, the film was screened at Bamford. It's my thesis project. It was screened at Bamford on the 15th of May. Yeah, one will have a different showcase. The journalism school will have series of showcases of all our work. So mine will be showcasing in Bamford on the 15th of May at between the hours of 3 to 5 p.m. So I'll enjoy you all to be there and watch it alongside those of my other classmates, which will be very interesting. And some of the characters in the film, I spoke to some veterans, and one particular veteran who was deported for 78 years, the one I talked about, he hopefully should be able to make it there. And some of the advocacy groups like the VFW in San Diego, hopefully they'll be there so they can, explain to us more about the case.
That's wonderful, and I hope our audience members will join us. Before I sign off, I do have to say you've got the best background. Your alterations to the Berkeley background are pretty awesome. So thank you for that, and thank you for being part of our competition.
Thank you.
Our ninth presentation is from Jaywan Saw, who is a fourth-year doctoral student in systems engineering in the civil and environmental engineering department. So 2 representatives from CEE today. Let's play the video.
We usually think of fiber optic cables as part of our telecom infrastructure, the internet, for example. But it turns out a single fiber optic cable can also act as thousands of tiny, highly sensitive microphones. This technique, called distributed acoustic sensing, also known as DAS, lets us listen and monitor what's happening along the cable, from whale calls underwater to traffic patterns and structural vibrations. DAS is a relatively new technology, and we're currently working on understanding its full potential, where it excels, where it falls short, and what problems it's best positioned to solve. Researchers like myself are testing its applications, pushing its limits, and refining the way we work with its data. So how does it actually work? DAS sends pulses of light through the cable and measures tiny changes in the return signal caused by disturbances, whether from distant vibrations reaching the fiber or direct physical contact. In a typical experiment, I connect one end of the fiber to the DAS device, which captures these changes and sends the data to my workstation for real-time visualization and later analysis. One project that I've led uses DAS to monitor whale vocalizations in Monterey Bay. Traditional underwater microphones usually only cover small areas, but with DAS, we can cover kilometers of distance using just one fiber. I found that it works well even in noisy conditions, with background sounds from water currents or boat engines. On land, I've also used it to track roadway activity. By detecting vibrations from passing vehicles and pedestrians, we can estimate their speed and also count the number of road users. My current work focuses on classifying them by characteristics like weight or vehicle type. This kind of data could be very useful for traffic management and road safety, especially in areas where other sensors are currently not in place. Beyond my primary work, I've also contributed to research monitoring water pipelines and wind turbines. Civil and energy infrastructure experience stress from wear and tear and external forces like earthquakes, and early detection of small changes can help prevent major failures. By attaching the fiber optic cable to the structure, we can monitor its vibrations and assess its health over time. There's still a lot to uncover, but DAS is proving to be a powerful tool. As we continue to explore its capabilities, we're also learning how to use it thoughtfully, effectively, and responsibly. So while fiber optics keep us connected online, they're also helping us better understand the world in new and unexpected ways.
Thank you so much, Jaywan, for such an interesting topic and great presentation. So I'm going to ask my own personal curiosity to start. I'm wondering, then could fiber optic cable that's already laid be adapted to provide this information, or would it all have to be new?
Oh, well, thank you, Lisa, for the great question. Definitely, the really key advantage of DAS is that it can be applied to, a commercial grade standard fiber optic cable. So that means we can leverage existing cables that are already in place. So definitely we can have dedicated setups, but we can also have DAS working on existing cables. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And so same curiosity that everybody answered, what made you interested in this particular area?
Yeah, I would say that growing up, I was really drawn to structures and systems that support everyday life, whether that's buildings or bridges, transportation and energy infrastructure. And over time, my interests have shifted from traditional design toward the challenge of monitoring and managing these systems more effectively. And so now in my PhD, I study how we can better monitor infrastructure responses to stressors like environmental change. And it's been really great to work with the goal of supporting better decision-making in the built environment space, by helping to predict infrastructure lifespan and improve maintenance strategies.
That's great. So besides getting to listen to whale noises, what aspect of the work do you find the most fun?
Yeah, that's another really great question. I just feel very fortunate to have worked with DAS in various contexts. And I think in overall, what makes DAS research really fun and fulfilling is that there's a surprise factor. So DAS lets us listen in on the environment in ways that weren't possible before. So that means, that leads to some really unexpected insights sometimes. Some signals that we consider noise can actually become signals of interest later on. And I really love the challenge of figuring out how to make sense of the data, especially in noisy real-world conditions. And because the technology is still developing, there's room for creativity. So trying new things, designing new experiments, tweaking those experiments, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible with DAS. And it feels really exciting to be working on something that feels new and wide open.
Thank you so much for helping us make even better meaning of the world around us and for being part of our competition.
Thank you, Lisa.
And our final and last but not least, 10th presentation is from Daniel Roban, a 4th year doctoral student in statistics. Let's play the video.
Here's a common situation. We want to compare a number of items, like movies, restaurants, or job applicants, to see which ones are better than others. So we have people provide numerical ratings, like a number between 1 and 10 for each item, and we compare the average ratings for each item. This is an approach that goes back almost 100 years, but there's a fundamental issue. People rate on different personal rating scales. For example, suppose we have two people, Alice and Bob, rating movies. Alice tends to give ratings between 2 and 9 out of 10, and Bob tends to give ratings between 8 and 10. If Alice and Bob both rate a movie 8, then these numbers mean very different things. Alice loved the movie, but Bob hated it, and the average treats these two numbers as the same. Personal rating scales can lead to unfair comparisons as well. If Alice and Bob rate different job applicants, then Bob's high scores lead to an unfair advantage for everyone that Bob rates. Averaging ratings forces us to interpret these numbers in a way which is divorced from their context. To approach this problem, I developed a research project which identifies the mathematical underpinnings of this problem. The paper I wrote offers a simple solution, a new method for averaging ratings. Here's how it works. When Alice rates multiple items, we get a statistical estimate of her personal rating scale. And once we know everyone's personal rating scales, we can combine them to form a consensus rating scale. This new method, which I call the rating estimator, uses this consensus scale to make everyone's ratings comparable without changing the underlying meaning of their scores. It converts Alice's and Bob's ratings into corresponding ratings on the consensus scale. So Alice's 8 might be a consensus 9, and Bob's 8 might be a consensus 2. Once everyone's scores have been aligned on this common scale, we can compare and average them fairly. The rating estimator outperforms the standard average across the board in theoretical analysis, on real-world rating data, and on simulated rating data as well. This more precise method of quantitative comparison allows us to improve recommendations for TV shows and restaurants. It allows us to pick better qualified job applicants that we might have previously overlooked. And in situations where people have different job interviewers, some more critical than others, it allows us to create more equitable systems of comparison. This research project allows us to see ratings for what they really mean, making our decisions smarter, fairer, and more accurate.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And as a user of reviewers online all the time and who wonders about their validity, thank you in terms of how to interpret. So I'm also curious, there are lots of kind of mathematical problems in the areas of statistics. Why is this particular problem the one that you decided to focus on?
Yeah, so I think that how I came across it was basically that I'm like the hypothetical Bob in that I give really generous ratings to everything. And then also on the other side, when I'm getting teaching evaluations, sometimes it's really hard to interpret what these mean at all. And sort of looking at this from both sides of the situation, sort of I can see that there are these numbers that everyone uses, but we don't really exactly understand what they mean. And I really like to understand everything that I come across. So it really piqued my interest.
And what do you enjoy most about your work?
So I think that one thing that's really interesting about statistics in general is that it has the kind of theoretical rigor of math, but there is a philosophical aspect to it too. So like, there's not always one single right answer of what you should do in a situation. And so you can sort of see that in this work about like, how should we be averaging ratings? There's kind of multiple different ways to do it.
Yeah, and especially they have a lot of power, as you mentioned, right? And so it's really important for us to be able to make meaningful claims based upon them. Absolutely. And so thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you for hanging in there until the end and being part of our competition.
Thank you.
And thanks to all the members of the audience for sticking with us. And I hope it's been made clear to you why it's such a privilege to be on the Berkeley campus every day. All of our students are just incredibly amazing. And so you've just gotten a small taste of the wonderful things they do on campus every day. And now it is your turn to vote and let us know who you thought gave the best presentation. And while you're voting, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of our participants. So if you could please go to the URL that is on the slide and cast your vote for the People's Choice Award, we would really appreciate it, and to submit a question for one of our contestants. If you are viewing this through our website, you can find these links above the live stream. We will now have a 10-minute break to allow you to vote and write in your questions. So please join us here promptly. I guess maybe we'll do a 12-minute break and we will come back at 4:25. Welcome back, and thank you so much to everyone who voted and who provided us with questions for our wonderful contestants. The first one is for Wang. Can you please tell us some more about how infrared detection can be used to scan groceries for spoilage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So infrared cameras, they can see wavelengths of light that we ourselves can't see with our own eyes. If you've ever seen a bruised apple, you usually end up feeling it before you see it. And so that's something that the infrared light is able to pick up that our own eyes can't pick up. It's able to see the deformations in the water in produce, whereas visible light will just be able to see just the color of the apple. But the infrared light will be able to see where the water kind of has moved in that. Yeah.
As someone who has brought home groceries that were less than ideal, that could be super helpful. So thank you, Wayne. Our next question is for Sekou. Are there other countries where you think your research could be implemented, or do you think these findings are specific to Liberia?
Well, I think that that's something that we're trying to look at. I do think that our findings have some level of generalizability. For example, nearby Sierra Leone, there are similar issues that I think that our experiment could generalize to and could achieve a similar effect. The only critical point we've been talking about, and there has been a question of a potential follow-up paper, has been about the amount. So this monetary transfer was around $80 per subject, And so in some conferences where I've presented this paper, people have said, okay, you've achieved this significant effects because this is just a lot of money for the Liberian context. So I've been thinking about potentially trying the same intervention and maybe bringing the money by half or delivering the money electronically rather than in person and so on. But in terms of to what extent this funding can generalize, I think to a pretty good extent.
Thank you so much, Sekou. Next question is for Zhe. What will be the effects of your research in the inner cities? And I'm assuming what they're asking is, you seem to be talking about highways. Could it be helpful in a city environment where you have stop signs and stoplights and those kinds of things, like maybe Berkeley, which is often difficult to drive around?
That's a really, really great question. And I think that our method do have the generalizability to other traffic scenarios. We just start with the highway because it's the simplest one, like because we don't have those intersections, we don't have those stop sign. And we do use the real world experiment to prove that our algorithm can work in this first step as a simple scenario. And the next step is extend and scale it and also apply that into other scenarios, for example, the arterials, and as you said, in the intersections. And it definitely can work because we just based on the real data and we try to compute those magic speed and broadcast to the car. So yeah, I hope that one day we can apply that and we can create maybe just an app and use that in Berkeley area and help to alleviate the congestion for everyone. Thank you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next question is for Sydney. Our audience members want to know where you got the inspiration for the nature and analogy to present your research. So what made you think of a forest?
Well, I love the adventure. I love the outdoors. I go backpacking quite a bit, and I grew up in Seattle, Washington. So I just thought it was just a really good representation of how complex a cell can be and how many different pathways are going on, and ultimately how all of these pathways have to function together to maintain a healthy living cell, just like a forest has to have the right ecosystem to be healthy. So that's how I got my analogy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sydney. So Hoyun, our audience wants to know how you think your research could influence educational policymaking.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I guess it's a bit more of a broader question in terms of application. I think of how oftentimes when we do traditional policy research, for those who are familiar, you might look at before and after a bill is enacted, and then you look at the outcomes, like, do you see more graduation rates, or do you see better grades or higher transfer rates, transferring from a community college to a four-year? But then if you don't look at what's going on in between, then it's hard to really concretely associate the policy with what's going on, because there's also so many other things going on in the world, like policy-wise, other policies are also happening as this policy is being passed. I actually observed that with this project as well, but you can't really fit that into a 3-minute talk, so I didn't go into that. But there's just so many different factors that you can't necessarily consider when you're just looking at measurements in terms of what happens after. So looking at the in-between is also important. And so I'm hoping, even if this particular case with dual enrollment can't be applied to all kinds of educational policy, it could still be a framework or an encouragement for researchers to also consider the different stages when we're doing policy research.
Thank you so much. People talk about it as the necessary, if not sufficient, conditions, right? And I think the qualitative work like yours really lets us dig into what the specific mechanisms of that might be for future research. So thank you. Jaquesta, our audience asks, would you be able to share with us more about the steps to the implementation or translation of this oxytocin sensing mechanism?
So it sounds like kind of asking about the steps to implementing this in a better understanding of neurological conditions.
I would think they're asking kind of how do we make the light bulb work?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right? Is how I would interpret that question. Yeah.
Yes. So making the light bulb work, essentially, what we want to do is we start by identifying essentially in this DNA SWENT construct, the aptamer that is actually producing that largest change in the turn on of the sensor. And so my graduate research so far has been using this sort of high throughput approach called the systematic evolution of ssDNA by exponential enrichment in order to identify those aptamers that would kind of best supply this need, and then characterizing those and taking those, essentially making the sensors out of those best performing aptamers. And so the steps that come after that are actually just the implementation of these into different stages of imaging in animal models. So currently we work with collaborators, or I work with collaborators who can take the sensors that I develop, like Nanox, and utilize these in a brain slice. So they are working with brain slice of rodent models and immobilizing our sensors onto these brain slices and using electrical stimulation to observe how the fluorescence changes in response to stimulation of oxytocin or neurochemical release. And from there, the goal is really just to start interrogating these neurobiological questions at the scale of these animal models, like the prairie vole, that have these social behaviors that are very similar to the or types of social behaviors that are very similar to the behavior that we see in human social behavior.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jaquesta. Jonathan, you are up next. The audience would like to know how you keep up with all the fast changes in the AI landscape to do your work.
Well, I think a lot of it is a lot of the AI models, they kind of go in phases. Like you had like convolutional neural networks, and then you had like transformers, which is kind of what GPT is based off of. So a lot of it is, a lot of paper reading and looking at a lot of the new code bases that are coming out. Tech is kind of a really fast moving field, and there's things everywhere. So you kind of try to look at what are the foundations for how something works. And then for any of the newest types of models or whatever they're doing in AI, you kind of just like try some of the new things that they have, put it into your code, and then you can start doing more simulations and just see how some of the energy analysis looks on it. So just constantly keeping up with the news, I guess, is kind of the TLDR, what I would say.
Thank you. Very important, the TLDR. Yeah. Cecil, the next question is for you. Folks would like you to please, if you could, talk about the process of gaining trust with the folks you interviewed for this project.
Okay, first of all, I was lucky to have the report from Berkeley Law. So with that report, I spoke to the Professor Rose Carmen Goldberg, and she was able to link me up with these people. And I had a series of phone conversation with them. I realized that they've actually been trying to make their voice heard, but no one has actually been listening to them. And they were willing to tell their story. So I traveled to Mexico. I'm working on this film with my colleague, Wayne Gray. So we traveled to Mexico in December to meet with them. We sat with them. We had Christmas party with them. They felt free and comfortable in our space to actually open up and tell us their stories. I mean, we even heard the story of someone who was deported all the way to Africa, to China, to different countries. They were all there to tell us their story. And we also learned that during this period, that suicide rate among veterans is higher than the regular civilians. So it was just getting to meet with them, sit with them, spend weeks with them, and they were able to open up and tell us their story, and they're still willing to do so.
Thank you, Cecil. And I want to remind everyone that your film, Blacklisted, about deported U.S. veterans, will premiere on Thursday, May 15th at BAMFA at 3:30. Public service announcement.
I hope to see you there too.
I'm going to try. I have family members actually who've had this happen. So next question is for Jaywan. What was one surprising thing you learned over the course of your research with DAS?
Yeah, that's a really great question.
One surprising thing is, I would say, just how challenging it can be to figure out how to interpret the data reliably. So DAS gives us a lot of information, but it's often really noisy, complex, and context dependent. And so perhaps when I first started out in DAS research, I was just, what stood out to me the most was just the potential of it. But as I worked with DAS, I realized just how complex and how difficult it can be to work with the DAS data, especially making sense of the noisy, context-dependent data for real-time applications has been very difficult. And as I also continued working with DAS and, talking about my research with others, there are a lot of questions about just what are the best practices for deployment, data management, and how to use DAS responsibly. So it's almost like, with great power comes great responsibility. As much as I've enjoyed learning and, developing research for DAS, it's been both surprising and kind of, I guess, inspiring to think about the ways in which I can contribute to using DAS in a robust, scalable, and trustworthy way.
Thank you both for quoting Spider-Man and for reminding us, right, of both the ethics of all of our research and the difficulties now that we have these large quantities of data. How to make meaning of it is really an important part of the process. So thank you. And last but not least, Daniel, your question is, unfair ratings have been a statistical problem for many years. Why do you think your method has not been developed before? And if other methods have been developed, how does yours differ?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that one reason why my method sort of hasn't appeared before is that in sort of the theoretical analysis of the problem, I sort of approach it from a modern perspective with some sort of modern mathematical tools. And what sort of pops out is this thing, which is, actually quite simple and, doesn't really depend on the sort of modern kind of perspective. But I think that to sort of find this solution may have been harder in the past.
So just how come?
Sorry, what?
Is it because we have tools now that we didn't have before? Is that why?
Yeah, there are sort of mathematical ideas that have sort of become much more popular in the last 20, 30 years, which I think sort of have become more and more popular, especially in the last 5, 10 years. And I think that some of these sort of inform my perspective and how I approach the problem.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And thanks to all of you. You not only gave us amazing presentations, you did a beautiful job in the question and answer period. And thanks to our audience for always, every year, you guys ask really, really good questions. So thank you for participating. And now, there we go. The bell tells me that we are ready to find out what the judges' decisions were and what your votes were. And so we will begin with the People's Choice winner, which is Sekou Jabateh for their presentation, Building Cooperation Across Ethnic Groups with Interpersonal Monetary Transfers, a Field Experience in Post-War. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I thanks so much to the entire grad pro team. I want to say thanks to my family, many of whom are watching, from distant time zones in the middle of the night right now. My big sister, Matenge, has always been my greatest motivation. So I send a big shout out to her. I want to say thank you to my advisor here at Berkeley, Professor Scott Strauss, and to my cohort mates, as well as my friends and families, and friends and colleagues in Liberia. This victory belongs to them all.
Wonderful, thank you. Congratulations, Sekou. Our second place winner is Zhe Fu for their presentation, Stop and Go No More, How a Few Smart Cars Can Fix Traffic Jams. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, I didn't expect that actually. Yeah, like thank you so much, because it's a really great achievement for myself. Like English is not my first language, like and I'm so grateful for my advisor, Alex Ryan, and he himself is a really good presenter, and he like motivates me a lot. And I really want to thank for all my collaborators and my lab mates, especially Nathan Lichtley. Like he helped me to improve my talks a lot of time. And actually right in this room, like I rehearsal with him a lot of time, and he helped me to like add a lot of hand gestures or so. And also thank for all like the Berkeley like graduation division. Like this is a really great team, and I have like improved a lot of the public speaking and also like the way to express myself. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And I just want to note, public speaking is a horror for most human beings, and it's especially, I think, hard when English is not your first language, and in particular in a high pressure situation like this. So I want to thank all of our non-native speakers for having the guts, as Victoria said, to put yourself forward in this competition, because it's a really hard thing to do under the best of circumstances. So congratulations. And finally, I want to announce our first place winner and Grad Slam champion is Jaquesta Adams from the Department of Chemistry for their presentation, Illuminating Oxytocin, How the Nanosensors Listen In on the Brain's Chemical Conversations. Congratulations.
Wow, thank you so much. I want to thank like my PI Marquita Landry for being super supportive of me as an advisor, helped me a lot when it came to actually putting this talk together in my lab as well, and my subgroup. Thank you so much to Grad Div and the AV team for really like being so helpful in better like cultivating this talk to be like less science and more like communication. Thank you so much to my family and friends who are also here to support me. I'm glad you finally get to see like what the research is that I do all this time. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations, Jaquesta. So Jaquesta will represent Berkeley at the UC-wide Grad Slam competition in Sacramento on April 29th, and will compete against the finalists from the other 9 campuses, so no pressure at all. And we hope you can tune in and watch her compete then. As we wrap things up, I hope we can give a final round of applause to all of our contestants who did just such a wonderful job today, both sharing their research and answering your questions. So maybe if we can have some applause for all the great work they're doing. And again, it takes a lot of time and energy and guts to put yourself forward in this competition. So I'm just so proud of all of you for how you showed up today. I'd also like to thank our judges. Okay, there we go. Our judges, our keynote speaker, Victoria, the advisory committee for graduate student and postdoctoral and scholar professional development, and all the staff members in the graduate division. There are many that made this possible behind the scenes. So thank you all. I don't want to list names because I'm sure I'm going to forget people. And also Berkeley AV, who every year works so hard to make this as beautiful and seamless an event as possible. We appreciate everyone's time and effort, and we appreciate all of you taking the time to be with us today and for supporting graduate education at Berkeley. What we do really matters, and I hope these students really make clear why that is the case. Thank you, everyone.